everyone and welcome. I'm Victoria Heron, MSM's Executive Director for Australia and New Zealand, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting, wherever that may be for you. For me, it is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. Our session today will run for a total of an hour, but 15 minutes of question and answer at the end. If you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat box and so we can address them at the end. MSM is an international education services company headquartered in Canada, but with a presence around 21 countries in the world. We help institutions build sustainable student recruitment growth in their target markets, achieve solid and consistent conversion rates, and support student retention by delivering quality and genuine students. Today, we're discussing Australia's international education rebound and looking at what institutions are focused on right now and their strategic priorities. We will also look at whether the government's international education strategy is the right one. And of course, we've had an election last weekend and we have a new government. So we'll just have a little commentary on that as well. So let us begin, and I'd like you to meet our speakers today. Please welcome Rob Lawrence, Principal at Prospect Research and Marketing. Rob's understanding of domestic and international education market dynamics, demand and drivers is unparalleled. Each year, he interviews many thousands of students, academics, employers, and opinion leaders on behalf of universities, governments, schools, institutions, and cooperative organisations around the world. Rob describes his role as projecting future market demand and testing market potential. For 3 decades, Rob has worked in 38 countries on projects for the Australian, British, New Zealand, Canadian, and Singapore governments, all of Australia's state governments, many peak bodies, over 90 universities around the world, and countless colleges, schools, and institutions. Over recent years, Rob has worked on the research and strategy to inform mobility, employability, accommodation, national and regional brands, online and market positioning strategies for government agencies, universities, and professional associations. And I also want to add that Rob is chair of the MSM Australia Advisory Board. Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Please welcome Neil Fitzroy, General Manager Marketing and Sales, University Partnerships Australasia for Navitas. With over 20 years experience in international education, Neil has been with Navitas since 2008 and is now responsible for sales and marketing for their Australasian operations, which covers Navitas Pathways, managed campuses across Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Dubai, and Sri Lanka. Prior to Navitas, Neil was in leadership roles in the international offices of Coventry and Sunderland universities in the UK. His earlier career started in Lagos, Nigeria, where he coordinated the activities for a consortium of UK universities establishing the then fast emerging market. Neil holds a law degree from the University of Exeter in the UK. Welcome, Neil. So good to see you both. So let's begin and launch into some questions, shall we? Rob, can we start with you? Australia's borders opened in December, students are returning, and there really is some optimism in the market. How would you describe where Australia is at this stage? Is there a frenetic race to resume international education back to pre-COVID days? Or is it as steady as she goes? What are you seeing?
Excuse me. Thank you everyone for joining the webinar. And thank you for the kind introduction. It's been a period of adjustment, hasn't it? Let's be honest. The last couple of years we've had to do that rapid transition to online delivery, and people have had to start degrees from their home countries often, and they've had to get used to that independent learning, which was something that not many people were used to prior to the pandemic. And we've also seen changing visa settings. We've had all kinds of things chop and changed actually over the last couple of years. But it's also, in one sense, can I say it's been a healthy rethink? I've been in this game 33 years, I think, and I did see the singularity of round and round people going. So many people are flying off to NAFSA, for example, today, and it used to be NAFSA, AIEC, API, the European Conference. It used to be those events, and people used to book their calendars just on that cyclical basis. And I think it's been a really good opportunity for people to reset and re-engineer what they're taking to market. And I've been working probably busier than I've ever been in the last 2 years as people are resetting, because they're really needing to work out, how do we do it? What do we do in future? Where's the growth opportunities going to be? What are the new needs? What are the new program areas? And with that, we've stopped the cyclical rounds, but we're also re-evaluated the way we do business. And I think that's, again, been a healthy thing. The way we engage and support students, work with agents and everyone. We've also been forced, in one sense, to identify new opportunities. When did I hear badge credentials 5 years ago? Didn't I? It was just used to be a short course or anything else they were using. Now it's kind of all part of the narrative. And we're seeing people doing more stacked qualifications. We're seeing different platforms for transnational education. And we're seeing this focus on diversification. And I will talk about that later, because I'm no doubt you're going to ask a question about the national strategy as well.
I am.
There is absolutely greater optimism, absolutely. And I think I'm seeing lifting of people's hearts as I go around. I've been to quite a few universities in the last few days, and I'm seeing people really positive about what's starting to happen. So I think that's good. But there's also been a realization that it will not be as things were in the past. That's the big takeout on that. And the other word which I'm using all the time, and institutions absolutely recognize it, they've learned that they now have to future-proof. And just that word future-proof is really fundamental in the whole conversation. So they're investing in new initiatives, they're investing in T&E, they're getting more programs to market quicker. We don't have that, it'll take a year to get that program. Well, if you spent that long doing blockchain, it's dead and buried now, and AI and all those other things are having to be much quicker getting it into the market. We're also looking at enhancing the opportunities. We've learned a lot from social license about how important it is that we've got to do more engagement with communities in future to help assure people. A brilliant scheme I've heard about recently is that Rotary are actually going to be supporting international students. They're going to put a member of Rotary all around the country to support an international student, so they become a point of reference for them for things like resumes and so on. But it's one of many, many initiatives. But all of this is giving the market confidence. It's been an important reset. Who wants it? No one. But it's forced us to really look at who we are. I think, to finish the answer, I think, in all honesty, Victoria, you asked me about what will change. I think it's going to be steadier. I think things are going to be more managed and more considered. I think we're going to be seen to, this has been a good thing. We're at a good stage now. And I think the underpinning thought, to finish it all, is the proposition is still strong. The proposition is still strong, but we have got to future-proof it.
Yes, I think they're excellent points. I'm hearing that term as well, future-proofing, that they're really, it's about taking the time as opposed to rushing out there and just presuming it's back to business as usual. Neil, can I ask for your thoughts on this question as well? What are you seeing in the market and with institutions presently?
Thanks, Victoria. And again, thanks for the invite to the webinar. I think it's important to look at where we were in that immediate pre-COVID stage. And I think it's fair to say we weren't in a nice, stable environment at that point. We were already, as we always do, see change in the industry. But just to call out sort of towards the end of 2019 was beginning of signs that China was beginning to turn a little, and greater concentration of Chinese students into a smaller number of institutions. And dare I say, the re-emergence of the UK as a viable competitor, particularly in the more migration post-study work market. So I think while we're looking at the COVID disruption, I think we also need to look at where we were in those months immediately preceding. Back in Australia, I think it's also fair to say that while we talk, and inside Navitas around COVID disruption, those 2 years have also seen a period of elongated border closure, longer than our other competitor countries, but also that was further impacted by negative messaging and false starts. As we look over that 24-month period, there were several occasions where students felt they were in a pilot scheme or more broadly on their way back to Australia, and were disappointed. So it's not just the COVID itself, it's, I think, the various messaging from various entities that went with it. More positively, I think we are definitely seeing green shoots. So fundamentally, we have students back on campus. We have the students that started from offshore. We've got new students who are joining in semester 2. And the overwhelming majority of Australian institutions are back to large-scale face-to-face teaching as of semester 2. So we're definitely at a milestone turning point. But it's early days. The reality was that the timing of all of this was really very late to have a significant impact on semester 1. And many of our more traditional source markets are still going through COVID disruption. We are not yet post-COVID in terms of our industry or the wider world. I think we've seen economies disrupted. We've seen high school systems in terms of timeframes and student cohorts disrupted. And I was in Sydney just last week, and that was a reminder that even with travel between Melbourne and Sydney is not yet back to a normal state of operations. I'm yet to do my first international flight, but many of my colleagues have. And again, I think we have to reflect that we're still in that ongoing disruption. But back to the green shoots. We've seen an underpinning interest in Destination Australia. We've seen agents, some of which have pivoted largely away from Australia for a couple of years to other destinations, re-engage. We've seen students interested in what we and our institutions have to offer. And we've seen, to Rob's point, we've seen many of the Australian institutions during this period really delve into their value proposition, the student focus in what is the offer and how does this differ to what's in other countries, etc. In terms of actual data, though, one of my experiences within Navitas is, as we go into 2022, we don't have an effective baseline. We can't compare pipeline or student trends of the last 2 years, nor the 2 years previous to that. So it's to some extent uncharted territory. What I will say is we've seen a very rapid return of interest and visa acquisition from some of the South Asian markets who have been waiting patiently to re-emerge. We're seeing a pipeline build of the natural inquiry, conditional offer, ELICOS, in terms of some of the wider Middle Eastern, Southeast Asian markets. But I think, and this is probably the biggest reset, is we're not yet seeing that interest return out of China. And given that has been the key source market, not just for Australia, but the other English nations, that is the major unknown as to the year and the 2 years ahead, as to what extent is that a short-term disruption versus longer-term restructure. So in answer to your question, Victoria, there is a lot of optimism. It's great to see events happening face-to-face. It's great to see people re-engaging and establishing old acquaintances. But there's a long way to go in terms of the what next. And I think we're only at the beginning of determining and working together on what that will look like.
Thank you. While I have you, Neil, with that in mind, what will international student recruitment look like from now on?
Oh, Victoria, I think it is, I think, true across my 20 years across the UK and Australia that the student and parent and sponsor drivers for international education stem far beyond the academic. And so I think what we have seen as student mobility returns to some semblance of ability, a real desire from that core student segment that are looking for that on-campus experience, looking for that cultural immersion, looking for that linguistic immersion and exposure, looking for the international mobility, looking to test boundaries. Like, that is still there. It may be harder to get on a plane today, but our students' key core student cohort still wants to do it, and they are doing so. So I think that segment exists. What I will say is the expectations, the concerns, and the key drivers of that student segment are evolving. Again, some of that may be COVID and health related. Some of that stems back a decade in terms of value for money, in terms of service, in terms of being really clear what Australia's value proposition is, and below that, what each of the individual institutions promise and then deliver on. So I think to that extent, it's getting back to a business as usual. I think the areas that the institutions have built of remote student support, of remote delivery, hybrid delivery will continue to inform the abilities of students to choose new pathways moving forward. But I don't see them as fundamentally changing that key cohort of the students that want to travel to Australia for a semester, a year or longer. I do think we're at a point in terms of now and the next year of rebuild. Frankly, Victoria, I think a lot of this is getting back to the basics. It's getting back to reestablishing those relationships. It's ensuring that we're giving a really strong, compelling proposition of why Australia and not the various competitor countries. And below that, why my institution? I think that's both in what we say and what we do. Brilliant Basics gets back to responding to student inquiries, issuing offer letters, turning around COEs, supporting students in their transition and their early onboarding and their study. That hasn't changed. But where I hope and expect Australia can win is in really upping the ante in that space as we did 20 years ago, and retaking that mantle as being some of the leaders in the field.
Rob, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I'd agree with all those points. I think it's it's re-engaging.
Yeah, Rob, what do you see has changed? For example, does T&E have a bigger focus now? Is there pressure to get international education back to where it was? Or what are the strategic priorities for universities right now?
Yeah,
and we've got
mixed.
Hybrid learning amongst all of that, you know, this blended opportunities and so on.
It is again, it's quite a complex ecosystem again. But I'm going to come on to 2 or 3 points on that. The first thing, I think that the growth imperative of growth has receded. I think some institutions of course want more numbers, and you've got some who became over dependent on certain markets, and I think a lot of us know who they are and which markets. So I think the growth imperative has receded slightly, but I think it's because people want it to be more manageable. We can't risk the exposure, and I've got some interesting numbers I could give you later on, but they want it to be more manageable and more cohesive, less reliance on specific markets. But then again, you've got to say, well, you want to have more, you want to have 50 different new countries coming on board with good numbers, but they might not want to come here. You know, we get market share because of proximity, access, lifestyle, but the UK's got other propositions. You know, you don't go to the UK for sunshine. So it's all those types of imperatives. Everyone's different. And so what people want might not necessarily reflect what the market wants. So, you know, that word diversification, it bothers me, because diversification isn't a panacea for all wounds. It's got something we've all got to work on. So, but people will want to be less reliant on specific markets, no doubt. I think we need to strengthen the core proposition, get back to basics as well. Really reinforce the world that we're a really good country in which to get educated, because we are. By every measure, this is the proposition is strong, as I said. But the mindset has also shifted internally within organisations. So I've been in many senior exec meetings in the last few months where people are saying, well, we don't want to assume we're going to get X percentage of our revenue from international students. That conversation has really become diluted. And I've seen some major extractions as a result of that. I think the behaviours, getting back to Neil's point as well, one of the things I suppose I should have added up when you asked the supplementary, there's not going to be such an intensity around travel. You know, we're not going to be jumping on the next plane to an event or going to see an agent. It's going to be much more managed and considered. And I think we'll see more what I call central events happening. I was invited only a few days ago to go up to Asia on an agents seminar, just as a facilitator for a day, because a university is getting all their agents together to reconnect with them. And so those types of things are beginning to happen, but I don't think we're going to have. I've been on planes. There's been about 20 other people going on to different places on the same in different areas. We're going to certainly, undoubtedly, see greater channel efficiencies. And again, I've been very occupied on a lot of offshore network reviews in the last 2 years, interviewing how people are coping, how people are managing. I did one study, which you know about, Victoria, which was for a university where we were there the same day, but coincidentally. And basically, of their 350 agents, I got 270 to speak to me. So people are wanting to generate efficiencies, and I know what agents are looking for now. Much more so, we're asking them the questions: have you struggled? Have you managed? And diversification, it's a bit like the word technology. You know, people in Australia define technology as computer science. People offshore don't. They define it as maybe cloud or networking or cybersecurity, AI, facial recognition. You know, I could name 200 applications for technology. It's the same as diversification. It's no such word, really. Diversification can mean more markets. It can be more T&E options, more online delivery. Blended delivery is certainly going to take off. I think we're going to see more and more. But I was talking to some international students last week on a Zoom call with about 10 of them. They didn't actually know what blended delivery was. So we're going to have to still keep working our language and our narrative to make sure people understand what the proposition is all about. And the shape of T&E will change. You know, I'm working on one where the T&E partner is actually a major corporation rather than an education provider. And that type of thing is starting to happen. People are talking more and more to the large scale manufacturers. Might see Samsung, for example, in Vietnam offering T&E through an institution, a TAFE or a university partner, as a T&E program. We're going to see different means of partnering, and it's not just going to be for degrees anymore. The market still wants a degree, because a degree gets you a long way towards post-study work rights, for example. But it's not just about degrees. It's going to be the mix, because one of the things we do know is people need to remain relevant and in touch in order to actually create a career direction. And we need faster products and services going to market. So what strategies, you ask, what strategies for universities? Again, I use that term future-proof. Again, they need to be sustainable. They need better reach. They need better depth. We need more, some universities became too reliant on postgrad. Some became over-reliant on undergrad. Some over-reliant on China. Some over-reliant on other markets. And then we need to, above all, redefine and rework. And I'd be interested in Neil's comment on this. What is actually meant by the student experience? Because we mustn't lose sight of what the student experience is. We do know that they do need more attributes. It's no good just having a degree and trying to look for post-study work rights. I've been working on that for the last year. You've got to give them placement opportunities, professional years, industry exposure, teamwork skills. You've got exposure to hackathons and incubators, and all the other things which create the student experience so they feel better prepared for work readiness. And we need more structured and coordinated global engagement. So I think that's what will change. Where it will be, I don't think the numbers will ever be the same, but they will be different.
Fantastic, thank you. So Neil, following on from that, can you speak to source markets, price points, and defining that student experience? And what are the main pressure points for Australia's rebound?
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. And I'll build a little on Rob's comments. I think building on one of the earlier notes, it's fair to say that some of the sheen's been taken off Australia in the last couple of years because of that long period of closure, because of the negative messaging. So I think first and foremost, we need as a sector to rebuild our core and rebuild the confidence of various stakeholders in our ability to engage and deliver. And that's the student body, but that absolutely extends to sponsors, parents, high schools, agents. We've seen amongst our partnerships, some of our very long aligned Australian agents pivoting during COVID to selling and become expert in other destinations. And I think to rebuild their confidence and trust in Destination Australia and our providers is really key to us moving forward. I think it's also fair to say, and this is that when we talk about diversity, when we talk about market, etc., a lot of the Australian narrative is around higher education. It's fair to say the education sector is much broader than that. And I think there have been significant successes across the years in VET, in ELICOS, in pathways, in high schools. And so I think the Australian sector working together and learning lessons across each of those different sectors, which ultimately many of them feed into each other, will be critical to having that united front as we rebuild our credibility. But in terms of the student experience, and I don't have the magic answer here, but to me that extends from the first point of contact a student has with their provider right through to being an alumnus. And I think my observation across many institutions is those are largely segmented journeys that have various and in some instances ineffective handoffs between different teams or different functions or different levels of perceived importance to institution. So I've seen previous to Navitas, some of my universities have a real focus on student acquisition. I've seen others have a real focus on student when they're with provider. And I've seen others with a pretty strong alumni or giving focus. And I think what we need to do is to look at that entire student journey as and the various touch points we've got. And I equally think it's not a provider-client relationship. The students are part of the journey. The students need to be part of the voice and helping drive that. But ultimately, that student experience, just picking a couple of points out, it's around feeling that they're valued from that first day of contact. It's making sure that the significant transition they've got, whether it's from source country or anywhere else into a new campus destination, is supported. And it's not a 1 week onboarding process that, for a few lectures, then they're good to operate in a university context. That transition for any student is significant, and for an international student even more so. So I think that area around student engagement, student support, around engaging students in peer support as well, that again, it's not all university or provider to student. It's around how do we engage our students with other international students, with Australian domestic students, and establish those all important networks. And picking up on Rob's theme, employability. It is, as we move into this century, the watchword. It's not new that we're talking about it, but I think it is something that we need to deliver on more than some post-study work rights or some job clubs or placement services. It needs to become much more intrinsic to the value add we're providing to students throughout their student journey and beyond. And that's around, as you say, Rob, it's around genuine credit-bearing placements. It's around work-ready skills. It's around engagement of industry in the design of degrees with a mind on the international arena, as well as what might be happening in our own backyard. Certainly, many of the conversations I've been in around employability focus on the country of the university. I think as we move forward, particularly as we become more global, we have to focus on employment options back in the students' home country and on how we can help prepare students for those outcomes as well. So for me, that's much of the focus and opportunity that reverse and turn it into pain points. And it's also the area that our major competitors, UK, Canada, US, are also looking at. So we've got the opportunity to collaborate, but we can step above them.
And I think too, adding to that, it's not just about the students who come to campus either. It is those students more and more going forward that we're going to see doing their entire studies online in their home country, or a hybrid version, you know, part home, part in Australia. You know, they should be having an equally high quality student experience and engagement, but also similar opportunities in terms of that employability piece. So Rob, just following on from Neil's comments, could you talk a little bit about how do we link education to post-study work with Australia's skills employment shortages? It seems to be a hot topic of late, like international students might be a magic solution to our skills shortages, but in reality, I'm sure it's not that simple.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I just want to reference also what Neil was saying there. Neil, I saw about 5 years ago when I was in the UK, I went to a university who actually incorporated an employability asset into every subject on every program. And that's the type of thing I'd love to see universities doing more around the world. And I also absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you. Some of the best initiatives have been outside of the university space and in the vet space. There've been some wonderful stuff going on there. So yeah, post-study work rights. Well, let's think about this from two perspectives. Firstly, the pace of change in new technologies and new industries and next generation industries is going so fast that it's impossible for education to keep up. You cannot develop a curriculum fast enough that's going to, by the time you're about outdated, 3 years later. So you've got to look at the curriculum now as teaching people the skill sets. Now, this is one of the big problems we've got with anything which has got around work rights, full stop. So we've got lots of cultures where the aspect of post-study work rights is a serious part of the value proposition, because that work rights means employment, and employment is the primary return on investment. But there are also significant barriers to post-study work rights. I think of professional years can be a problem as well, with people saying, well, hold on a minute, the visa, the 485, if you spend a year doing a professional year, an employer might say, well, I'm only going to get that graduate for a couple of years max before they've got to go home, or will they go home? And they don't necessarily understand it as well. So I've been talking to employers and industry and line managers. A lot of them don't know what a 485 is. And a 485 basically is your ticket to post-study work rights. So it gives you an opportunity. But if the industry doesn't understand it, then we've got a problem. So many employers think the visa is too short for employers. And there's also there has been too much visa uncertainty globally, not just Australia, everywhere, about visa settings. People are nervous about visas. What if, there's another terrible disease that goes around. There's a few circling at the moment. So we've got to really look at what's happening in terms of the mindset. What I will say is international students are an incredible source of talent and can address many of the gaps in the work environment. But employers also want other things. They've got to have the technical qualification, and many international students come here for a technical qualification. I'm not talking technology, I'm just talking for the degree. But they fail to engage in the other aspects which employers want. For example, if you want to get professional accreditation from a professional accreditation authority, you can't stick on your 6.5 IELTS to get into Australia. You're going to have to get up to 8 by the time you graduate to be allowed to even apply for professional accreditation in many, many areas, because the professional accreditation authorities are their own regulatory environments. So they dictate, well, we want the very highest standards of English. So if students aren't taught they've got to keep their English language proficiency increasing, then they're going to have more and more skills gaps. And we've seen that, nursing is the best example I can think of, where we just can't get enough international students to become nurses because the English language requirements by the nursing authorities is so high. So we've got to make sure that people still keep looking at building their skills, their capabilities, their attributes. I used to joke about this, but I don't really mean it as a joke, but I say, imagine they've got a kit bag on their back and every week they've got to chuck something else in to make them more employable. It could be a short course, it could be a program, it could be an experience, a mobility, a study tour. There's lots of ways. It's been hard in the last couple of years because you can't have the physical interactions, but we can now. And I remember, I remember once, this is a good example for everyone to hear. I heard a few years ago, I was interviewing a bunch of human resource directors of the law companies. And I said, I stupidly said, I thought it was a good question at the time. do you want people who've worked for a voluntary organisation, legal aid or something like that? They said, no, we want people who've worked with grumpy customers, because everyone coming into a law firm is grumpy. And it makes a lot of sense. So where do they get those customer interfaces? They've got to know how to do that. They've got to know how to innovate and create. It's one of the biggest skill gaps I see amongst international graduates is lack of creativity and problem solving and proof of teamwork interaction. So we've now got to really make sure that they equip themselves to those qualities. That's what industry wants. That's what employers want. And at the same time, we've got to break the barriers down so employers realize the talent they actually have. We've got some incredibly talented people. Neil answered one other point, which is, I know we've got only a few minutes more for questions. The pressure point is always about money. Every time. Money is the pressure point. And other pressure points aren't just about what's happening internally. It's also the national strategy is a pressure point, because that's forcing people to think outside of what might not be possible. And then there's also the offshore capacity. How do you suddenly increase your offshore capacity? That's a pressure point too. Everyone says, get me more online students, get me more T&E students. How? It's a hard battle. Their partners aren't just queuing up for them, because everyone wants the same partners. That'll cover that, I think.
Well, Rob, that's a lovely segue into the next question, which is the alignment of, we touched on the alignment of international students with Australia's skill shortages. It is part of the government's international education strategy. The strategy sets priorities for the next 10 years and also includes focus on diversifying student cohorts, source countries, strengthening connections between international students and the Australian students and communities, and growth and global competitiveness. Is it the right strategy? Why or why not?
I suppose I can say safely now, can't I? Because it's better change of government. So
it's a former government strategy.
Look, I understand why we had it, and I can understand why the focus. But also, I don't like strategies that are written by committee, in one sense, because we've also got to get back to the harsh realities. In your introduction, very kind introduction to me, you said, Rob, your job is about forecasting demand. So if I want diversification, how do I suddenly stop students from China coming to Australia to study business? Now, in 2019, just to put this in perspective, there were 8 universities in Australia which had more than 4,000 undergraduate students from China studying business. Just one course, one degree at undergraduate level. I can think of a faculty I visited just before COVID where I think the international students from South Asia constituted 98% of their entire cohort. So it really is, it's a lot of things that you can't change. And the group of 8 universities, which are, as everyone knows, are the kind of the higher ranked, generally more expensive universities. That's why they've got a higher proportion of students from Southeast Asia and from China, because of affordability, rite of passage, all those things. Whereas new emerging markets, and I think about having seen Nepal over the last 10 years or so, and the Philippines just before COVID struck, they were often going to new HEPs, non-university higher education providers to a degree, because of affordability issues. So you can't suddenly say you're a new HEP and you've now got to get more students from China, Vietnam, Malaysia, if the market from those places doesn't want a new HEP because they want to go to Melbourne, Sydney, New South Wales, Queensland. Then you've got regional. I caught a taxi in Darwin about a year ago in between lockdowns, and I was talking to someone at the university there, and they said, well, every taxi driver in Darwin is a student, international student. So you've got them, and why are they going there? Because of regional credits. Why is Geelong so busy? Because it's an hour from Melbourne, but you've got regional status. Why is Adelaide growing so much? And then you've got country cohorts. So you've got a large South Asian student population in Melbourne, for example. And I'd actually say they're residing in the outer layers. It's about, on average, it's about an hour's commute for an international student from South Asia, but it's less than 14 minutes for someone from China because they live much closer to the city centre. So it's all about product of place, and it's about product of demand. South Asia, we know, high technology IT demand. And then you've also got one, other interesting fact with all this is that it fails to sometimes recognise that Melbourne and Sydney, as 2 examples, have the highest numbers of international students of any cities in the world of more than 50,000 people. So that really puts it in, and I think it's about 7 times higher than some of the big destination places like Boston. So it really is, it's a big part of the DNA. You can't suddenly say diversify if the demand is to go to Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane. You know, in fact, it was Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane was the third. And then you've also got the social license stuff. And social license is something I was very engaged with during the pandemic, because we've got to really improve our community engagement. It's not just about diversifying students, but diversifying the opportunities and collaborative means for them. So it's all part of the proposition. And we do offer a very globally competitive proposition around quality, rankings, recognition, pathways, price points for many areas. Some places are expensive, some are less so. But we have got to make sure we don't just force fit what is wanted to what the market wants. And that's why I always worry about national strategies. Not this one, any ones in the past. Because it's not up to the government to set it, it's up to the market to indicate what it is. That's ultimately what it's all about.
Yes. I want to touch on the social license piece again too, because I think it's been talked about a lot, in that, you know, the perception of international students among the broad Australian community is that the messaging always seems to be about the revenue that they bring into institutions, and yet very little is actually talked about in communities and to communities about the benefits to communities that they bring, and that social element, not just employment, but just that cultural engagement and all of that in communities. And I think that's something that really warrants more attention. I think it was interesting during COVID, my sister said to me, I said, oh, international students can't come. And she said, well, that's okay, because now domestic students will get places. And she had no concept of, no concept of, that the two don't sort of align that way, in the same way. And when I explained it to her, and then I was able to really share with her what international students do bring to our communities, it was like a light bulb came on, and she went, oh my gosh, of course. And
I'll give you one very good example on that one, because I worked on it in 2019. I was asked by the Victorian government to calculate what one graduation ceremony was worth of visitor numbers into Melbourne. And it was the RMIT one. And that was worth $53 million for one day into Melbourne from visiting family and friends.
Amazing.
It's huge numbers. And that's not students. That's mum and dad coming down for the graduation.
Yeah, yeah. Neil, do you have anything you'd like to add to this in terms of about the education strategy?
I think little to add from Rob, to be honest. I think just reiterating, this is a very broad church when we talk about sector. There's very different institutions within it, in the higher ed space, in those other subsectors. I felt looking into the strategy that it was more evolution and revolution. I was desperately looking for a game changer in it that I could pin a strategy or a future state aspiration to. And frankly, the one outside of some of the grandmother's statements, what I did note after a decade of reticence was using education and migration in the same sentence. That recognition of the value that education plays in attracting highly skilled future migrants, to me, that was probably the highlight of that recognition. But it's where that's taken in terms of future policy, future settings, that's the interesting point. There was little else, and it will be interesting now with a new government to see the devil in the detail of some of that.
Speaking of new government, we're going to finish our questions with a comment from you both. We had a federal election on Saturday, and we do have a new government. Could I ask you to make a quick comment on this outcome? Obviously, there's nothing for sure right now, but just your impressions or thoughts or perceptions on what you think the new government can do to support Australia's rebound and the sector broadly, because I think we'll all agree that during COVID, the government was missing in action in terms of our sector. What are your thoughts on this now? Neil, would you like to go first?
Sure, Victoria. Look, I think, first of all, having watched it avidly as the first Australian election which I voted, what I will say is, although it's still forming, the government that's forming is much more reflective of Australian society. So I think when we look across the board at any lens of gender, of ethnicity, of origin, of linguistics, it's a much broader representation of Australia than we had in the previous government, and that I'm certainly excited about. And just calling out two headlines in my head, you know, one of the members of parliament was elected, can speak 10 languages fluently. Like that's very impressive. But secondly, for the first time in the Australian government, we've got 6 females of South Asian origin in the House. And again, these are really indicative of, I think, that it's interesting when we look at the Independents and the Greens and some of the balance of power, there is a clear mandate of addressing climate change. There's a clear mandate of addressing equality. That's exciting in terms of getting Australia back on the world stage. And I'd actually, just my general thoughts, probably stem beyond education, that I think as we come out of the last couple of years of COVID, this is a really timely opportunity to re-establish Australia on a world stage. My take is we saw that in the Quad meeting on day one of some of the narrative and some of the representation of Australia there. And I'm excited about what the next 3 years will bring for education and also for wider society.
Thank you. Rob?
Well, we have a friend from our sector now in the Labour House. He won very successfully. His name is Julian Hill, and I'm hoping his voice will resonate strongly. He was in charge of the Victoria Government unit that was responsible for international education. He was the one that helped set up the Study Melbourne brand. So
Right.
he is now, and this is his second term, so I'm expecting he might get some kind of position or advisory position. He's a friend, and I think he's the kind of person that will take issues and points to the party room, and that will make a big difference, I think. So he's a big asset which no one's spoken about. It's the first time I've made reference to it as well. I'd send him a note of congratulations, that's all. We need to give people certainty, and we've got to get rid of the uncertainty which the last government did offer. I don't like offering political views, personally, but I did the social license study, and so I was front end of it for 4 months non-stop, and it was the negative feedback which I was getting, which everyone watching this would have known about. We've got to undo, and we've now got to rebuild and really instill confidence back to the market. And
yes, and on the world stage again, I agree. Thank you both. Let me take this opportunity to thank Neil and Rob for the discussion. Great insights and thoughts on, what is going to be an ongoing topic and discussion for some time yet till we find our feet. I'd like to now open for questions. So please, if you would like to ask a question of our panelists, just pop it in the chat box right now. I can see that there's a couple of comments there, so let's have a look at this right now. There's a couple of comments around the delays in terms of COEs being issued, appointments for medicals, delays for the second semester intake, and additional biometric requirements. Neil, what are you hearing on that front?
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. I think this reflects the ongoing disruption we're seeing, either as volumes are now preparing to travel, or indeed there's disruption to high schools or biometrics or secure English language tests. So certainly in much of the modelling I'm doing within Navitas, we do anticipate that some of those normal flows of markets that you'd expect to see in high volume in semester 1 may well shift to semester 2. I think we will see that at least for next year, just as students get through the new reality of preparation, results and travel. So, and for me, that's a real opportunity for the institutions to be responsive to those changing student needs. It's around the responsiveness, the flexibility, to be able to provide appropriate support and pathways to those students. But that, without even referring to some of the new infections that have the potential to disrupt, I think we were, even just with the remnants of what we're seeing out of some of the COVID, I think we're in for at least another year of relative disruption.
Right. And I think there was a level of preparedness for a rush on visa applications, but arguably not as much as probably was needed, but there's certainly, you know, some delays.
And just, Victoria, just reflecting on that, I think I'd rather hoped that we'd watched the Canadian experience where some
Yes.
real own goals with visa acquisition delayed and prevented their ability. I have to say, the Australian experience at this stage does not feel that extreme, but it's absolutely, as we move through the rest of 22 and into 23, it's absolutely where we need to get that right, in terms of the institutions, in terms of DHA, in terms of all of those ancillary providers, because you only need to look at some of the media, the international media in the last couple of days around the UK and their processing times blowing out. So again, I think it's a significant risk. And to Rob's point, that's back to credibility. It's our ability to deliver, but it's also, given Southern Hemisphere semester one, we've got the opportunity over the next 6 to 8 months to ramp this up and actually take market share from some of those competitors.
Yeah.
Rob, did you want to add something to that?
I just think that last point was superb. It's we have got advantage. I know I've seen a lot of decimated offices, you know, because they were quiet. You know, we've got problems getting a number of people back to mobility, as an example. You know, it's you know, mobility closed virtually, so well, it did close. So basically, we have got to get some repair work. We've got to reinvest. We've got to retrain, reskill. It's going to take months. I think Neil's better positioned to see it because I'm on the outside, he's on the inside. And so I don't know what the day-to-day conversations Neil has with his team, but I'm sure it's all about, we've got to make sure our workflows are seamless and our throughputs are accurate and our testing and compliance systems are perfect.
There's a question here that sort of speaks to some of this. What in your mind or thoughts or is data showing you is the period we're looking at before we, you know, settle? You know, we have some rhythm and we have some, you know, I don't want to say normal because I think that is a word no one ever wants to use again, but it's that sense of, okay, we can exhale a little bit now and feel like we've got a rhythm in terms of our students coming back, applications thriving, visa processes being managed well. Also, we've got a very strong regulatory framework that isn't, you know, going to be, you know, and that's an important part of the Australian piece, I think, and a valid part of the Australian piece. So just some thoughts on what might be timelines.
I think we've stopped the arrhythmia. I think that kind of joltiness, the heartbeat of start, stop, and everything's gone. I still think the heart's beating a bit slowly because we're still building up pace. But I reckon by about August intakes, July, you know, August mid-year intakes, we'll start seeing a little bit more clarity and certainty. I think we will get China coming back quite strongly next year. And I think there'll be a lot of, I think the negativity towards Australia from China will be significantly reduced. I think that'll be a priority for the government. But I also think that people just need to recalibrate. A lot of families have lost their money. Don't forget, over 92% of international students come from families with their own business. So those businesses, you know, Sri Lanka, no petrol. You know, you've got you know, mum and dad markets have gone. They've been closed. They've lost product. They've not been able to manufacture. There's, you know, people aren't investing so much, purchasing so much. It's just, you know, all kinds of things. So we've got that. So they've got to recover. So people have got to recover financially. They've got to recover in themselves. There's also the anxiety stuff. You know, people were very anxious over here when the lockdowns happened about their families back home. Couldn't go and see them very easily. And, you know, and I suffered from that one, as I'm sure Neil did as well. So it's
Me too.
and you too, Victoria. I forgot you've got family all over the place like me. So we've got to really, we've all got to stabilise and just take a deep breath and just start getting back. And I think next year we won't have the same numbers. It's going to be 2025 for the same numbers probably, but I don't think we'll go at the same rate of growth either. I think we'll stabilise, steady the ship, and I think we'll be more efficient. Very much so. I think efficiencies will be front and central of how we perform.
Thank you. There's a question here that we've only got a few minutes left, so I'd like to get this one in. Interested in comments from both Rob and Neil's recognition of what the vet sector is doing as far as job readiness and employability. Does the panel think that setting up articulation pathways to improving our international reputation as it currently stands?
Neil, do you want to go first?
I think it's, and a risk of politicians answering them, I think it's a part of it. I think those the pathways and the partnerships to other outcomes is part of it. But I equally think, and it's interesting going back to some of my UK days a lifetime ago, I think the vocational and polytechnic education, etc., is valuable of its own right as well. So I think we need to be careful to not see it purely as a pathway to some of the partnerships on higher ed, but also really valuable outcomes in its own right. But I'm also conscious, Rob, you've got much more in some of this space than I have. So
yeah, I agree with your comments there. But the other thing is, I've long thought that vet is being under-recognised, well and truly. And I remember going up to Vietnam in 1995, and there was a vet provider from Melbourne who actually had a contract for 20,000 traineeships in Vietnam. Vet has been part of the region for a long time. Chisholm had a huge contract in China just before COVID, I think they were doing 3,500 electronics engineers. It's been they've done partnerships long before with many universities. The very first partnership in Australia for any Australian was a vet organisation. Actually, it's in photography in Malaysia. That was the very first education partnership of any twinning program of any sort. So vet's been out there since the beginning. It's just that there are some big brands like the William Angluses of this world, but also they're very good setups, and they've got good programs that cater for certain segments, you could say. So Chisholm, the only reason to use that because it's my nearest vet to where I live. They've got a wonderful Bachelor of Technology degree. And I think just before COVID, they had about 600 students from India just doing that. So it's got...
I also think the vet sector is going to play an enormous role in transition and new industries, training and education, because they're so well set up for exactly that kind of role.
And they don't have long, slow bureaucratic approval processes.
Exactly. Look, I think we're going to have to wrap it up there. We're literally a minute to the hour. Look, this has been absolutely fabulous, and I've loved this discussion because I'm an enduring optimist. Rob, I know you are too. Neil, I know you are as well. So we wanted to really tackle this subject from that position because we do believe Australia has an enormous amount to offer. It's an opportunity for innovation in our sector and to try new things without rushing back to the way things used to be. So we have recorded the session, so this will be made available to you. I'd like to once again thank our panellists, Rob Lawrence and Neil Fitzroy, for all of their perspectives and amazing insights. Australia's rebound is well underway and there is much optimism in our sector. There appears to be a genuine and authentic desire to deliver education options that meet students' needs and ensure this student experience is second to none. Australia has always been one of the world's leading international education destinations, and all the reasons students chose Australia before COVID have not changed. From here on, however, I think we are going to see more innovative hybrid learning experiences that will serve students wherever they are. Thank you, everyone. I really am grateful and appreciative for your time today. Rob, Neil, thank you very much. And I'll say good afternoon.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.